All right, my patrons. We're now on the 7th installment of my advancement into this flower of a book, If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler by Italio Calvino. And let me tell you, this thing has really become something that I'm beginning to enjoy. You know, sometimes you dread doing things that you know are for your own well-being, but this is becoming something where I'm reaching this peak over here, and it becomes sort of something I'm interested in to see where this is going, because I really have caught like a scent here, and I think that's sort of what happens when you find a good book, right? It's sort of like you've actually found something. And this last chapter is just full of so much. We followed our main character here, who went back to the publishing house with this guy Cavadogna, trying to figure out some more of what has been going on with these books that have just been sort of published, that have one story then another story, and they all just kind of trail off, and it's like causing confusion among a lot of groups and people. And we've seen his story develop, and there's like a love interest involved, and there's some philosophy about, language and of right and wrong, and sort of all these things intermingled. I'm so surprised that I've never heard of anybody talking about his books or these books, because here in a little bit you're going to almost see that there's he's bridging this into some sort of Da Vinci Code or Orwellian kind of text here, with just how much control or loss of control our world seems to be, and how we actually represent a sense of our own control, and how control itself is extended by different groups and peoples around the world to basically affect our senses of control. So anyways, he's in here reading, and I just wanted to read a part about this, because it's just so interesting the way that he describes this figure that he's come across, because he's going through all the notes that have been sent to the publishing house by a translator, full of all these stories and excuses and whatever else of his communications with the publishing house, who's getting paid by, and all these different things. And the guy was just he's I can't make any sense of it, maybe you can, or whatever, So he was reading through the stuff, but then just listen to how Italio Calvino writes this idea of of thought. I think this kind of goes along with a little video I did the other day about us having a perception of order in our lives. It's as soon as we come across some form of power that just seems like it's so malleable, it almost elicits some great idea of order, almost like there has to be an end, and maybe this is the end. And it's like power is then out of our reach, and it's almost like we're being put into some sort of box, like, you know, our coffin, and buried 6 feet under, just surrounded by stuff that we can't understand. But before we get to where he's actually sort of writing about, you know, this idea of something so fluid, I mean, we're getting to it here though still. He says this, he says, so he's at the publishing house and he's like looking at all the raw material and things are being dismantled and reassembled. Now you understand Ludmilla's refusal to come with you. You are gripped by the fear of having also passed over to the other side and of having lost that privileged relationship with books which is peculiar to the reader, the ability to consider what is written as something finished and definitive. And I think there's something very magical about that, because I feel like I understand completely what he's saying. It's like as soon as you kind of pass on to this other side of being able to create wealth yourself, it's almost like you've just sort of, I think one of the biggest fears in the world is work. You've given yourself work, because now if you don't do it yourself, then you really don't have any excuse to create wealth. And then maybe you're creating more and more fear, because then maybe your world is becoming unraveled as you sort of, you know, like reach back into the wild of having to sort of create this idea of civilization all over again, as you see how even everything is takes this shape of having no definition almost, right? And it's sort of scary in that sense, I think. And maybe this is just, you know, some understandings that we can actually have of what we experience in life even. But then he goes on even more to like talk about this order, and there's some religiosity interposed into this, and there's all of a sudden these multiple factions who are like these for the archangel of light and the archangels of shadow, that are like all trying and working to control what is being published and basically passed off. I think that there's something else that maybe we come to realize as a reader at this point, but it's just something that we come to realize in our lives. It's, do we trust authority? If authority is something that is as malleable as it is, then does not everything lean towards its own interest? Then can we trust authority? Which means that perhaps there are worse things to read. Do we trust books even? If books can be, they're no longer this like intangible sort of like spectral type of energy that is just saturated with goodness, all of a sudden they can become corrupted, and they can corrupt all things, and we can corrupt the minds of whatever, you know what I mean? And there are certainly plenty of people who have written on things like this. I mean, one of my go-tos that I always refer to is like Thomas Aquinas, who's basically says like nothing can end basically bad. You know, so in the end, he almost kind of is convictingly saying that truly nothing can be without God, basically. And so it's almost just like, if you kind of believe like that, you can sort of even push through things that would be scratchy and pokey and you know, sweaty and dirty and whatever else, and you know, just say all things for the glory of God or whatever. But this becomes very interesting here as we're reading these letters to basically the publishing house here. Here's how he describes some religiosity in terms of like some force driving the narration of things, and it's very interesting. And I have another thing to say too, which is like, it's almost like good writing and good stories are lies. But it's just like you lie so well, sort of thing, that it's like forgiven. It's like you're truly like leading things astray. But you lie so well that it's like you can't help but understand that there is something great there. It's like you lie so well that indefinitely it is almost unbelievably good, because it just points to their being good by how well you do it. But anyways, he says, the father of stories, several years before their appearance, the old Indian, according to some, is the universal source of narrative material, the primordial magma from which the individual manifestations of each writer develop. According to others, a seer who, thanks to his consumption of hallucinatory mushrooms, manages to establish communication with the inner world of the strongest visionary temperaments and pick up their psychic waves. According to still others, he is the reincarnation of Homer, the storyteller of the Arabian Nights, of the author of the Popol Vuh, as well as of Alexander Dumas and James Joyce. But there are those who reply that Homer has no need of metempsychoses, since he never died and has continued through the millennia living and composing. The author, besides the couple of poems usually attributed to him, also of many of the most famous narratives known to man, Hermes Marana, putting a tape recorder to the mouth of the cave where the old man hides. So it's just very interesting. And then we get into this story of this guy going around and getting into these various, like, of this translator or whatever, getting in these various, like, escapades kind of things, like all of a sudden getting involved with, like, a sultan, and the sultan's wife has to have, like, reading material, but there was, like, a problem of basically confidentiality, where people were sending secret codes to other people in the Sultan's regiment, and it was like, the Sultan's wife must never remain without books that please her. A clause in the marriage contract is involved. But then the Sultan fears, apparently with reason, a revolutionary plot. His secret service discovered that the conspirators received coded messages hidden in passages printed in our alphabet. So then all of a sudden, he's like working with this Sultan and stuff, and they've come up and devised this way of, like, having it so each book is split, and then that's where some of these, I'm sort of extrapolating here, some of these publications come from, is because this individual has cut and spliced all these stories so that messages can't be you know what I mean, like, transported across these distances to conspirators and whatever else have you. And it's like, so then he writes sort of his conclusion of what he's written. Again, all of this is written very, like, it's very easy to lose your place here. Like, it is extremely easy to lose your place. But it does help if you are interested in kind of what's going on, and you sort of are seeing things like I'm saying, right? It's like, how can something have so much change, but the idea of there being, like, something that is basically just again, that idea of belief that I've stated before. It's that idea of the belief is true, and it's like, however hard you really do believe in something is what happens. And it's scary, because I think that we can fail from that, but then also we can fail from the fact that life isn't just belief, and it sort of continually is just like this thing that we can never really understand almost, and we try to, you know what I mean, and it's like, it just enlists so much at the same time. And so I think he's sort of, you know, declaring some of these things, and he ends up saying this: as far as you are able to gather from hints scattered through these letters, apocryphal power riven by internecine battles and eluding the control of its founder, Hermes Marana, has broken into two groups: a sect of enlightened followers of the Archangel of Light and a sect of nihilist followers of the Archon of Shadow. The former are convinced that among the false books flooding the world, they can track down the few that bear a truth perhaps extra-human or extraterrestrial. The latter believe that only counterfeiting, mystification, intentional falsehood can represent absolute value in a book, a truth not contaminated by the dominant pseudo-truths. It's just wild, guys. It really is. It really is just so wild. So that's where we're at, basically. And then he's just about to read another story here. And this is just the beginning of the next chapter, and it's called "In a Network of Lines That Enlace." So yeah, like it's very interesting stuff. I think that there's like so much here to sort of wonder about and contemplate on. To gravitate with, almost. There's so much to resonate with. Just take your pick, you know what I mean? It's there's so much here. It's like and it really does just invoke that whole idea, you know what I mean, that I've sort of said before. That's just like, maybe this is all the same story. You know, that's something that I think I was sort of relating to when I was talking about good and evil being true. Then if there's good and evil, then maybe we really do just have one purpose in life. Maybe we really do. And it's like, if that's the case, then there really is true order and there's true purpose. But does that actually give us more does that give life itself more purpose if we have purpose, or does that actually just make it so we're soulless? Is there really any more sort of story than the story of good and evil? And if we get sucked into that story, is it really just the same characters kind of thing, and there's really only one way to progress? You know, it's just all it's like and this whole book is like this. It's just very much like, I don't know, maybe at the beginning it kind of did start off kind of drafty a little bit, but I'm certain that it helps me having these little sort of documentary experiences as I'm reading, you know what I mean, because it gives me something to look forward to every time I'm reading. I'm thinking, oh, what should I mark in here, you know, that I can sort of glance over again as I'm sort of paraphrasing things to you guys or whatever. Just, you know, it really gives some idea of there being structure, but it's a structure so small that it's like undefined. That's why I was saying that it's like belief, you know, and it's like that structure that is so tiny and minuscule. It's so undefined because it's pure potential. It's like pure emotion. Which again just invokes that whole idea of you know what I mean, like, do we trust that, or do we fear that? Is that what authority becomes? If that's the case, then is there order or is there control, actually, if that's what all things have been reduced down to, is just pure sentiment almost, you know, that whole idea of life having feeling. Is there something concrete beyond just that, if that's sort of what it reduces down to? and maybe that's what we're then dealing with, is at that pinnacle of a moment where we've reached the tip of the spear, as they say, basically, you know what I mean, a real turning point, or sort of turn back now, you know, or forever hold your peace kind of thing, right? And I'm mixing sayings there, but I think that it all sort of says the same thing anyways. Point of no return, speak now, forever hold your peace. Right? But yeah, it's just such an interesting thing, and it's extremely great to think about. And you know, the thought of me seeing somebody look at an individual just off by themselves, just, you know what I mean, enjoying the thrills of a novel, you know what I mean, and thinking that it's like, wow, this is like groundbreaking, universe class, you know, sort of black ops tier, you know, beyond presidential, kind of beyond genius, in terms of the power's there, but you got to believe, kind of thing. Right? Just you know, the idea of fearing power, because, you know, at that point in time, maybe it does invoke that, like, all things do just end up with God. And that's what I'm saying. Then it does just invoke that whole idea of it is all the same thing then. Maybe there is some real fear of that right there in that moment. Because then that moment just kind of does whatever it wills, and it's almost like no telling, you know. I know I've tried to understand what we can't understand so many times before in my you know, my sort of little what do I want to call them? That's the thing about writing, is you can just, you never know how, like, maybe writing really does have so much space there, because it is really just like coming out of nowhere. There's so much just silence involved in the whole process that it's almost like it totally is silent. I know yesterday, I feel like I don't have to try and add on to that so much today, because I really do feel like I sort of understood that, you know, a little bit there, but it's just my little meanderings, you know, kind of over here. And just that idea that it's like, you know, that truth, you know, if it really is only like kind of like one truth kind of thing, and maybe that's why we enjoyed something, is because for a moment it seems so different, but if it really does mean that much, then it almost just means the same thing for everybody, you know, which is maybe what we're all looking for, but maybe that's not what we want, because that we want to be something ourselves. And you know, it is something that I actually did describe yesterday, which was just kind of like, here, I like to fall back on my own sword if I can, rather than somebody else's. I wrote, how do we know what a line is if we aren't eternal? Just like you know, that that whole idea that a line never really ends. Or how do we know what the truth is if we're not really eternal? You know, just trying to think about something beyond our understanding, and to give some allowance maybe to the world that there is magic. Maybe that's all that anybody is searching for in words, is power and magic. Sort of interchangeable more than anything, I would say, you know what I mean? Everyone's searching for that gold, which I think is funny for me to say. But you know what? It's still sort of like life has a way of pulling you back into the place where it's like, this is almost how it has to be. And so it's that same thing on the great end of where I just said it's all the same thing once you reach that minuscule point. It's the same thing when all of a sudden you think that you have discovered something. Life, you know, not only finds a way, but life goes on too, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And it's almost like that moment where life finds a way and life goes on is the same thing. It's just this thing of no matter how much you think you found the trick or the magic or the power, you know, sort of, if you have, I think that's the real magic here. I think that it's like, really, if you've kind of found that, and I'm really trying to connect this with kind of what I've said, you know what I mean, is that it's like, if you found that, it's the same thing. And you know, I think that's what we fear, but it's what we it's like we fear that, but that's the idea of normalcy, is that everything is sort of experiencing the same thing as well. That's how you can communicate. But so I think that's, you know what I mean, one of our greatest triumphs as something that can reason, but then it's sort of the failing of reason itself as well, because then it's like a rock almost experiences nothing more or less than, you know what I mean, like an ounce of gold or whatever, you know. And it's like all of a sudden we're seeing that with the world as just this man who's, maybe he was once a greeter, you know. It's now you understand Ludmilla's refusal to come with you. You are gripped by the fear of having also passed over to the other side, and of having lost that privileged relationship with books which is peculiar to the reader, the ability to consider what is written as something finished and definitive. But is that with relationship as well? You know what I mean? And I think that it's sort of, again, it approaches that idea here where we're like reading about these people, these other women in this book, and he's like, all of a sudden they all seem like that same woman to me. And so it's just very interesting, you know what I mean? But that's like, it's like finding that love, but do we then at that moment in a relationship, I mean, as everybody says, right, as much as I can quote everybody and just have some extreme common sense here, like, you're born alone and you die alone. Is that comforting or is it sad? You know, like, maybe then you can really claim. Maybe you can really claim some stuff then, if you really are born alone. And then maybe if you die alone, you don't have to feel bad about dying, you son of a bitch. Bye.